Hello, and welcome to another MarketMuse Content Strategy webinar. I'm your host and the co-founder and chief product officer for MarketMuse, Jeff Coyle. Today's discussion is titled The Business Case for AI for Marketing, and it's going to be a discussion focused on artificial intelligence concepts, research, and really actionable paths to turning yourself into an internal champion for you or your business making an artificial intelligence investment. We're also going to talk about some misconceptions and ways people can kind of communicate artificial intelligence internally to have them translate into getting buy-in for budgets, getting buy-in for kind of wins, making illustrations of pilots that can be produced, really covering everything. Before I introduce our special guest today, a few housekeeping notes. Ask us questions, any question. Before, when we were prepping, we said, anything you want to ask about artificial intelligence, put it in the chat. We'll either get to them in line if they're directly relevant to what we're discussing. We have a Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. But if we don't get to those, we are going to do an Ask Me Anything for Paul. So you can ask him anything about the business he works with, the Institute, as we'll discuss, or his publishing, or anything you want. Sign up for the Content Strategy Collective Slack community, and that Ask Me Anything is going to be right after the show. So you get those links, and there'll be a promo at the tail end here. The recording and notes are available for the webinar. They'll be sent out to you in a couple days. And while you're in there, check out our archives. We've got some amazing recordings from all around superstars like Kevin Indig from G2, Hamlet Batista about technical search engine optimization, amazing analytics people like Andy Crestodina from Orbit Media. If you download a few of those, shoot me an email at jeff@marketmuse.com or get in touch with me on Twitter, and I'll set you up with a custom content strategy session with one of our content advisory team leads. All right. Deep breath on the housekeeping. And now for our special guest today. He's the founder of so many things. Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute is what we're going to talk a lot about today. The AI Academy for Marketers, which is just kicking off, but also PR 2020, one of my favorite entities in our space. Quick brag, Paul also manages MACON, which is a marketing and artificial intelligence conference set in Cleveland. I've been able to work with him on that and a number of other efforts, and always has everything put together. Superstar, gets the right talent in the right place. But quick brag, and he's also got some great books. I'm not supposed to plug them, but I'm just gonna say, go check out Paul's books. Paul Roetzer.
It's great to be here, and yeah, thanks for the introduction. It sounds exhausting when you start listing things, but yeah, I mean, the agency, obviously we've known each other for a long time, but PR 2020 is the agency. I started in 2005. Some people may be familiar with us as the first HubSpot partner, so we were sort of the origin of their partner program that today has, I don't know, 5,000 to 10,000 agencies worldwide, I would guess. So we started with them in late 2007, and so we were very early in marketing automation. And then Joe Polizzi, who started Content Marketing Institute's a good friend of mine, lives a couple blocks away. So Joe and I have known each other for a long time, and so we were real early on in the content marketing movement as well. And so yeah, it's just sort of like we've been lucky enough to be at the front end of a couple of really important trends in our industry over the last decade or so, and AI is the one that I've really been focused on since around 2011. Right after I finished the manuscript of the first book, I started really paying attention to artificial intelligence and trying to understand it as a non-technical person. I'm not a machine learning engineer. I'm not a data scientist. I was a liberal arts major, journalism school. And so I come at this with how do we make this make sense to us and to other people?
Yeah, and so how did that create the idea for the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute, and then MACON, the event series?
Yeah, so it's actually that background is a good precursor to why we built an institute. So pretty much what happened is in 2011, IBM Watson wins on Jeopardy. So we all probably remember beating Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter, and they touted it at the time as AI, a watershed moment for AI technology. And I didn't get it. I was fascinated by it, but I didn't understand what Watson really was and how it worked. And So I started doing some research. So I wrote my first book April to June of 2011, and then the book came out in December of 11. So after I wrote the manuscript, I started going into like research to understand what exactly is AI and how does it work. And then 2012 was a lot of reading and understanding that, okay, it's giving responses based on probabilities of something being correct. It's basically statistics, but it learns and it uses natural language processing to understand questions. And so you start like unpacking what exactly it was they did, and you realize that what they're trying to do was give machines human-like abilities. And so with the slide you got up here, like what exactly is it? The best definition I've seen is the science of making machines smart. And what Demis Hassabis, the founder of DeepMind, means there is machines don't know anything. Like software doesn't know anything it's not coded to do by a developer. And so you start looking at all the software we use in our industry or in your life, all the hardware and software, it's not smart. It's coded to do something, and then you as the human or the marketer write rules to tell it what to do from there. And so it took me years to get to a point where I was comfortable to be like, this is the best definition. Like, I don't care if you're a machine learning engineer or a deep learning scientist. Like, I don't really care what else your background is. As a normal marketer who has tried to understand this, it is the most practical and logical definition. Now, you do need to unpack and explain what smart means, but that's kind of what we looked at. Is so for 2012 to 14, I was trying to understand what it was. 2015, I had actually devised this idea of now that I understood AI, I realized you could probably build what I was calling an intelligence engine to automate marketing strategy. So back in 2014, 15, this was my thing. Actually, starting in 13, I started building the software myself to do this. I want 500 new leads next quarter. I got 300 the quarter before. How do I get the 200 more, and how do I make them better leads? As a marketer, I have 20 years of marketing strategy experience, and I know that I'm going to miss 80% of the opportunities to do it. Like the probability of me creating the optimal strategy is so low, even with the background I have. And so my thinking was, well, what if you took the Watson-like ability to process all this endless data, give it all the blog posts in the marketing industry, give it access to anonymized data of tens of thousands of campaigns, and then know outcomes of those campaigns and money spent. And if you had all this information, couldn't the machine recommend what to do to get those 500 leads? That was my use case that drove me trying to solve AI. And so in 2015, I talked with a bunch of friends and venture capitalists and explored the idea of building a company to do this. And 2016, I walked away from the tech side of it. It's not me. I'm not the tech guy. I'm not the one who's going to build the software. So we said, well, what can we do? And we said, we can tell stories. We can build an institute dedicated to explaining this and helping it make sense to other people.
And then that's really where we started connecting. Was we were building from a platform perspective of ways to start to predict, but there's other branches, and I think that the one important part about artificial intelligence is, probably everybody on this webinar and maybe listening to the recording know this, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of branches of artificial intelligence. We hear it so many times, and Paul does, I know, at his conferences and events. It's like, is that AI?
Right.
What's that's not AI. I've heard so many people who have said, what is it? What are the components of it? Is it guiding a person to making machines smart? Is such a great way to summarize that, the fact that it's not just about robots walking in the door or delivering you pizza. It can be about any component that's being trained. And I know that you've said a lot of times that I'm thinking about the ways that work, and then also different types of use cases for you, for your persona, whoever you are, whether you're a content marketer, whether you're a search engine optimization professional, thinking about ways to apply it to your life really, really advances the learning curve. Can you elaborate on that and the ways you've seen people really think about this differently?
Yeah, and so I think it's a really important path to go down of even that definition of making machines smart. on its core, it's a simple collection of words that seems very logical, but you do need to step back and say, what does smart truly mean? And so it's important then to understand that the two distinctions you have here. So we have machine learning and deep learning, because it's very confusing to non-technical marketers. Like people who aren't machine learning engineers don't really think about this, but you'll hear these terms used almost interchangeably. And as a marketer, you're like, okay, do I need to know what deep learning is? Is that the same thing? And so the simplest way to think about it is AI is this umbrella term that means this collection of algorithms, tools, techniques that make machines smart. Machine learning is the primary subset. And what machine learning does is it takes data in and it makes predictions about future outcomes. And the key to the learning part is it literally learns as it keeps making recommendations. So it can keep getting smarter in what it's recommending. So the majority of the use cases that marketers will experience in the coming years is likely going to use some form of recommendation or some sort of prediction that's powered by a machine learning algorithm. Deep learning is where, like, if you think about how the human brain learns, it's a very complex thing that the reality is we actually don't really know that much yet about the human brain, as crazy as that sounds. But what scientists do know is we learn and think kind of in these layers. So if I look at a chair and a table or a cat and a dog, my brain, unbeknownst to me, actually processes textures and colors and shapes and all of these things that helps me know as a human that that's a cat or a dog or a table or a chair. Or if you're trying to get a car to drive itself, is that a human or a telephone pole? That's where deep learning comes in. It's this ability to kind of build these neural nets within the machine where it can try and process things the way we would as a human. So, you know, the ability to have vision, the ability to create language, the ability to do all these things that for us comes pretty natural. Those are insanely difficult for a machine to do. And so it's all forms of AI. We like to actually bucket it into three categories: language, vision, and prediction. And so those are the kinds of things that when AI is being applied, you're trying to either give it the ability to hear and create voice, to understand and create written language. In the vision, your facial recognition, the way your iPhone unlocks, it sees your face, image recognition, like, and so it's not perfect and it's not all inclusive, but if you think about language, vision, and prediction, we tend to view those as the kind of the parent applications, and then there's a bunch of other versions within those.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to walk through it. And, language, vision, prediction, that covers a great percentage of them. And I think the way you described it, just to unpack a few of those things, is really smart. I think the way that one person I heard describe this, and my reference is out of my brain right now, was that the humans love for patterns to exist, even if they aren't they don't have causation to outcomes. We often think that everything needs an algorithm, and a very simple algorithm. So if this, then that. We're not naturally thinking that machine learning exists. We're not naturally thinking that our brain works in those mysterious, more complex ways. And so when you think about artificial intelligence, it's taking you from like simple algorithms, if this, then that, to learned algorithms, or ways that are trained algorithms, so that there isn't an easy way to explain the metrics that go in, because there's so much training that happens. There's so much complexity in the neural networks, the layers and layers of algorithms. So I think that that's a really great way that you described it. It's going from a basic observation to something that's going to get better over time.
Yeah.
And how did that drive you, kind of with the Institute, to begin kind of researching? Was it, thinking only about, the branches of AI or how to classify them, or were you looking to, solve problems for the audience early on?
So I would say that, somewhere around 2016, 2017, when we really started writing a lot of content for the Institute, and most of my public speaking was centered on this, my comfort level by that point was largely being able to explain what it is. I still, quite honestly, struggled to give you a bunch of use cases for it, to say, okay, as a marketer, here's the 10 ways you can use AI today. So early on in the development of the Institute, we created a tool called AI Score. And the idea here was to do the heavy work up front of what are all these possible use cases, and then give marketers an ability to go through and review them. Because to me, seeing, okay, I can write email subject lines, I can optimize the existing content on my site, I can manage my media ad spend, that's more tangible. So talking to me as a marketer about language and vision and prediction, like, it's fine, but it just feels not specific. But once you start identifying individual things and explaining, AI is trained to do specific tasks. There is no like global AI platform we just turn on and marketing becomes smart. It's, I spend 100 hours a month doing this thing, and if I can do that thing for 20 hours a month better, then that's something I'm very interested in. So we basically work with companies like yours, and we went out to the industry and said, and tried to understand the actual use cases that technology was being built to intelligently automate in the industry. Now, it's probably important at this point to, before we talk about some of the use cases, to explain to people there is no like 0 to 5. If you think about autonomous vehicles, Tesla didn't make a car off the factory line that just drove itself back in 2014 or whatever. They're still trying to get to the point where it can stop at stop signs on its own. And it has been this progressive thing over the last 5+ years where they're training each piece of it. And so when you think about autonomous vehicles, we went from 0, being humans doing all the driving, making all the decisions, to, I guess you could probably argue Tesla's autopilot is maybe around a 3 today on a 5 scale. And there's actually a formal standard industry scale. So I think it's officially like around a 3. That's what we're talking about in marketing. We're not trying to take humans out of the equation and take everything you do and just like make machines do it. We're trying to take, like a MarketMuse case, like, I want to make the content on my site better. I want to better optimize it on our domain strength to get it to show up and to answer questions for the user. How can I do that? I'm not going to replace my writers. I'm not going to like, and so I may go from a 0 of all human all the time to maybe a 1 or a 2. And that's good enough. Like, that's going to save me time and it's going to improve my performance. And so if you want to jump ahead, I think what we have is some samples of some of these use cases. So in AI Score, we predefined, I think there's 63 use cases right now. And as a user, this is free and it's ungated. There's an optional, you can put your information in, but you don't have to. And it's score.marketinginstitute.com. I'm sure we'll put it in the call notes, but
Yep.
so score.marketinginstitute.com. And so you can actually go through and self-rate these 63 use cases on a 1 to 5 scale, actually 0 to 5 scale, of how valuable would it be to intelligently automate this task, this use case. You don't have to have a deep understanding of what AI is. It's just this theoretical question of, if a machine could help me with this, how valuable would it be in terms of how much time am I going to save, or how much money am I going to save? And so we have 63 of these, and these are actually the top rated. And this is from a sample size, I think it was 210 when we pulled this. We've had over 700 people go through and do these ratings, so we have a much larger sample size now. But these are still pretty reflective of where the data shows us. So you can see that things like identifying gaps in existing content, choosing keywords and topic clusters, buyer personas, creating content, insights from top performing campaigns. Those are some of the top rated things that people identified, again, on that 0 to 5 scale. These are the average ratings, and those are the highest average ratings. And so that AI Score tool was meant to help people just get a better tangible grasp of what actually is AI and what can I use it for. And then at the end of that tool, we'll like surface some vendors that do the things you rated a 4 or a 5, the high probability things.
Right. So when you were, what were the types of like overarching sides? So content being one thing. I know personalization is another thing that you're looking at. Targeting, campaign management, spend management. What does that encapsulate it? Were there some other areas or other kind of concepts you were looking at in those 63 base questions?
Yes. So the original way we tried to splice it was actually by what we called the 5 Ps of AI. And so it's planning, production, personalization, promotion, and performance. And what we did there was, rather than predefine based on categories of marketing, so like advertising, content marketing, analytics, direct marketing, ABM, conversational. Like you could go categorically and look at all the use cases. We try to look across a broader spectrum of whether I'm doing planning and content or planning and advertising, it can help me do this use case. And so the current generation of AI score is within those 5 Ps, and the future iterations will likely get more specific based on what category of marketing you're interested in. So if I'm focused on content marketing because that's my role, because people do tend to self-identify with a category more than they would like one of the 5 Ps, we're kind of restructuring it to adapt more to where your priorities may lie.
Absolutely. I think you're a little biased to the letter P, so I think that's a good move. So you're in a good spot there.
I think, honestly, I think it was based on, if you went through marketing in college, you learned the 4 Ps.
Yeah.
And I think I had that in the back of my head when I did it. I honestly, I'd have to go back into my journal notes and remember why we went that path, but I don't know.
That's fun. So the goal of any of these types of efforts is, you are connecting people certainly to vendors, right? But it's also about turning them into internal champions. And when you're talking about having a buying team, maybe you don't have all of the power to drive a purchase decision, especially for some of these technologies that are significant investments. So you've got to, if you feel that this is something that's going to impact your business dramatically, you've got to cultivate internal champions outside of just you to make this purchase decision. So, just like with any other software selection or any other technology or services selection, a lot of things are, you need to check off a lot of boxes. From your standpoint, what are the ways that you've tuned your advice or advisory for people with the Institute as the flag that you're flying to ask better questions, to build better internal cases?
So it's a question I'll commonly get, especially after a conference keynote or something. It's almost inevitable. Like the first question is, well, how do we buy this tech though? So, okay, I get it. It's going to have a huge impact on the world and the industry. I generally understand what it's capable of doing. I think I know an idea of what my pilot projects might be. I'm going to start in content strategy. I'm going to start in media ad spend or whatever. How do I actually talk to these vendors? Because everybody's claiming they have machine learning or AI of some sort, and it's really hard to cut through the clutter and figure out who has legit technology. So what we'll often guide people is you do have to think about it a little differently, but it's also very important to understand that in a lot of these companies, the sales people and the marketing people selling the product don't have a deep understanding of AI. Like there's a chance if you sit in through this webinar, for example, you may actually have more knowledge of AI than the salesperson that's trying to explain machine learning to you when you're buying the product that does managing of your ad spend. So you do have to go in with a little bit of a different set of questions. If you're the person in charge of piloting this in your organization, and maybe it's a little out of your realm of comfort, you may want, if you're in a big enough company, get the IT or the data scientist to sit in on a call with you to be able to ask some more technical questions or understand technical responses. Because if you're relying on them to make predictions about your users, it's really important that you understand where did they get their data from? How is the data structured? What's the quality of the data? Are there any ethical concerns for where that data was gathered or how it's being used? It's similar to buying marketing technology, but it takes a divergent path when you have to understand what it is they're promising that AI is going to do. And so there are some of these things, you put in here as samples, but I think the best way to go and the simplest way to go is to know your use case. So again, let's say it's I spend 20 hours a month optimizing content on my website, and I want to use AI to make it smarter. Go in with that use case and say, okay, you're a content intelligence tool. You claim that your machine learning helps me do X, Y, and Z. Here's my use case. I spend 20 hours a month doing this thing. Here's my list of 10 tasks I do every month to do it. Here's what my goal is as a marketer. I'm currently using this tool, which I have to manually do everything in. You're telling me your AI tool automates some of this. Explain to me process A, what I'm doing today, versus process B, what you're proposing. You don't have to understand the algorithm. You don't have to understand the data structure. You just want at a very high level to say, how is what you're doing making what I do smarter?
Absolutely. No, I think that that's a great way of putting it. I mean, I also like to, as you mentioned, I think you alluded to it. It's like, who owns the technology? Did your team develop it? Could it go away? Are you, solely channeling an API, from someone or as a data source? Will you not reveal your data sources, or, you know, are you willing to provide me with more of a sales architect role during this purchase process to detail these processes? Like,
Right.
why would I want to make this huge investment if I didn't know explicitly how I was going to implement it and didn't have expectations of those outcomes? I think that's huge. That's huge, and that gets into, I know that some things that you speak to or advocate for are the development of pilot efforts, the development, especially if it's a very large investment, of clear project plans.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to need help. I mean, realistically, some of these things are going to need support, because what I've seen in big enterprises is there is no AI marketer on staff. Like, no one's coming out of college right now with a degree, like a minor in artificial intelligence and a major in marketing. It's just, it doesn't exist. So you're often taking like someone with analytics in their title or digital in their title, or like somebody that the CMO thinks is more tech savvy, or maybe it's the team that's leading digital transformation, something like that. And they're just saying, can you go figure this out? Can you go find the pilot projects, or can you solve the way to use AI to do something? And it's literally that random. Like, we've done consulting where some pretty large organizations that are just like, hey, we have to come up with a pilot project for AI by the end of the year. Or, hey, we've been told by our CEO AI is working over here, and we have to figure out how to make it work for marketing and sales. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what business goals is it tied to? Like, why are we doing it? So that's, this business case. Like, if you have to go make a business case to do it, then you're going to be coming at it from, here's the benefits of it. If you're being told to pilot it, you still want to reverse engineer it to fit a business case. Like, you're going to want to know what success looks like in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, because there's such opportunity for marketers who start to develop capabilities in this area, to understand this technology, to understand what's possible with it, to understand how to talk to the vendors. Like, you can write your ticket for career advancement right now if you become savvy in this area. And so I would just challenge people, like, if they're the ones that get the opportunity to be the internal champion, like, think about this as your opportunity to truly advance your career, because there are so few marketers in the industry right now that are competent in this area and confident in their ability to talk about it and to run projects internally. I mean, it would be hard. You could go back to marketing automation when it really started taking off in like late 2008 to 2010 range, like maybe similar, but I think we're just so far beyond that in terms of the scope of what could happen for your careers and businesses with AI.
Yeah, you don't know the use case that is going to be that MarTech or the CRM of this. There isn't extreme clarity, but if you've got artificial intelligence, marketing savvy, search engine optimization, and content strategy or content savvy right now, I mean, your wallet isn't drying up. That's
Right.
for sure. I mean, this is your path to, this is a path to, becoming a thought leader. We had a great conversation with Hamlet Batista, a couple of weeks ago about how he transitioned into thinking about artificial intelligence to, to drive his agency. But there's a lot of firms who are starting to think, wow, this is what everyone needs. So if you can do that as an in-house, also an amazing thing, really amazing thing. And so when you say like started with a pilot, what have you seen be, successful as far as the scope of pilots and, yes or no, or what have you seen, be a kind of a gotcha, or where have you seen there be to kind of less resistance with implementation?
Yeah, so we tend to look at getting started in two main buckets. One is a problem-based model, which is tends to be more like a traditional business challenge consulting model, something you'd go hire a consultant to come in and solve for. So it's like we have this problem of, our email database keeps growing, but the open rates are staying flat and the conversion rates are actually lowering. And if we could just get a 2 percentage point lift on this, it could lead to $100,000 more in revenue every year. Like that's a business problem. You've now stated a challenge you have. And so what you can do is take problems like that and say, okay, traditionally we used this technology to solve this. We had two people on our team that had this capability. Here's the challenges we're running into. Here's what we think's causing the issues. We're not segmenting lists. We're not doing any personalization. Everybody's getting the same emails. They're all getting sent at the same time. There's no time zone consideration. There's all these issues that could be causing these challenges.
Mhm.
And you go and look at holistically and say, what are all the ways we could potentially come at this problem? And so we think about that more as like a 3-month project. Like you're going to invest some resources because you know the value of solving it. You know there's like a reason to go in and do it. So that's a bigger picture play. And if you do some really big ones, they may end up not working at the end. And so you may spend 3 months, 6 months, and 50,000 or 100,000 in consulting fees and end up with nothing. And then all of a sudden, nobody's that excited about AI anymore, and things just don't kind of go. And all of a sudden, the industry's moving past you. The alternative way is a quick win pilot project approach, where you look at use cases and you say, we spend 50 hours a month doing X, we spend 20 hours a month doing Y, we spend 200 hours a month doing Z. Here's what the cost is from a labor perspective. If we can intelligently automate any of these things, we can immediately see improvement. We can save time and money and reallocate human resources to other areas of strategy and creativity and whatever they may be. And so there's less risk. You can move on them much faster. You can see results of them much quicker. And if you pick the right starter projects, you can start to build momentum and you can start making these business cases of like, hey, look, we got this one tech for $100 a month. We got this one for $200 a month. We got this one that's an existing add-on to part of our existing tech platform. Together, those three things helped us do this incredible business outcome. We want to put more money towards this in 2021. And so that's like, I think most businesses are going to take that kind of scaled up approach of pick a bunch of little pilot projects and start layering them on top of each other. Because then if you miss a couple, fine, you're gonna, like, this isn't 100% win rate. Maybe it's 20, 30%. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but you don't want to get locked into a bunch of long-term stuff and invest a bunch up front if there's a chance it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think they're exactly right. I think that one thing that when we're speaking with folks, it's to say, is your mirror truly tuned, right? So are you willing to present your current success rates? Do you understand your key performance indicators enough to tie a key performance indicator to a use case? One most common one that we work with is content efficiency. So for however many content items you publish every year, you can come up with a reasonable investment of human hours, or if you're spending actual money to source drafts or to work with outsource writers, how much of that content is successful. If that number is 5%, 10%, which sadly enough is roughly the average, if I can find a solution that can make that percentage of success 20% and clearly define the use case, that's an easy sell internally. If I
Yep.
can look at, like you mentioned, in the top of this webinar, I generate 300 leads with these channels. Can I come up with a combination of campaigns and efforts and investment that leads to 500? Okay,
Right.
typically that's a marketer's job. How do you turn that into a business case? And from your perspective, like what avenues have you seen people think critically about? I know you had the 5 Ps, but
Mm.
when you're talking about vision and you're talking about personalization, how do you build business cases around something that the tactic isn't something your business has ever even thought about, versus in our case, obviously updating content, creating content, you're probably already doing it, and
Right.
we're making that dramatically. What if you've never thought about personalizing? How do you make that jump?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we actually have our piloting AI course we have where we'll give them a workbook, and it's actually structured by those categories of marketing. So if you're an advertiser, just make a list of all the things you do as an advertiser. I manage the media spend, I monitor performance, I update creative, I do all these things like daily. These are my tasks as a advertising professional, and that's your starting point. Like, look, and then there's a column for how much time you spend every month, how much money, hard cost you spend every month, what's the value to intelligently automate, what's the ability to intelligently automate, like, is the tech there, do you have the resources to do it? So we get a lot of people that'll come to us either through the institute or through the PR 2020, which is basically the service arm of the institute, and the consulting arm, and they'll want to go right into advertising, email, or content. It's like, we're spending $50,000 a month on advertising. If we can spend that better, like, we can see improvement immediately. Like, what can we do? Which tools should we use? Same with email. We send 200,000 emails a month. Like, if there's ways to improve open rates or click rates or deliverability or like whatever it is, the value is there. So I think anytime there's a more obvious value, to your point about a KPI tied to a business case, if it's a known valued KPI within the company, it's like, I have to report on these 5 metrics. You help me improve these metrics and guide me which tools we need and how to integrate them. If you come at it more, yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of interested in image recognition because I think I could, like, tag the pictures on my site better. And it's like, yeah, you could, and that would have spent 200 hours tagging all the images yourself, but maybe an AI can tag it for you. But like, is that tied to a KPI? Like, is anybody going to understand or appreciate that if you do it? Like, you'll think it was magical, and it was, but does the CMO care that all the images are now tagged? So
Right.
it just, I think anytime you can tie any marketing thing, regardless of whether it's there or not, to a business goal, you're always going to be better off.
Right. No, that's a right on. And the one add on to that I would say is, if you've got a hard spend and you're presenting the cost as just the hard spend without any soft spend or human spend or any resource spend, you're doing yourself a disservice. I see so many cases where you're trying to make the case for paid media budget, or for like you kind of mentioned the cost of the software that powers an email platform, without allocating any cost to the people operating those systems. Like, on a paid side, how much are you paying the person managing your AdWords account, building those landing pages, implementing those landing pages? So often we speak with persons that are stating, oh, well, I spend about $100 per content piece. And I'm like, no, you don't. It's probably more like 1,000. You think it's 100.
Yeah.
And so when you get into it, it's really to say, how much time did I spend reviewing this? How much energy did we spend talking about it, brainstorming it, updating it after the fact? And the person who I actually cut a check to, who wrote it, only cut me a check for $100, but my cost to the business is thousands. And that
Yep.
is, an easily documentable thing. There is the same example up there for every other industry, every other marketing effort. The amount of time expensive humans spend looking at it is
Right.
really hard to sell internally. You've got to sell that internally. We've got too many skilled persons looking at this campaign, and looking at spreadsheets, building pivot tables, whoever, whatever it is. It is $1,000 per unit thing. Anything that you think is $100 per unit, you're probably making a bad business case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny because, obviously I run an agency and we track everything. Like, literally every detail is time tracked. Now, ironically, so my first book, if anybody's not familiar, was the Marketing Agency Blueprint. And I made the argument that agencies should eliminate billable hours. I think they're a terrible business model. It's all in favor of the agency and not the client. You are incentivized to be inefficient if you pay an
Absolutely.
agency by the hour. Yeah, like, they have no motivation to get things done fast. So we actually use a point model where it's a fixed point value. It doesn't matter if we take 3 hours or 10 hours, you're going to pay for the points that you've bought. But even though I am the biggest advocate of eliminating billable hours, I am actually a huge advocate that corporations should track everything employees do for the exact reason you just gave. you should know the efficiency of a project. Like, you should know that if you paid a freelancer $100, but someone make $100,000 a year, spent 3 hours editing it and reviewing it and rewriting it, and then 2 other people edit it, and all of a sudden it's 9 hours for that $100, you're totally missing the absolute cost of a project. And if you scale that over a year, if you got a $50,000 budget or a $5 million budget, there is so much waste because people aren't tracked by efficiency levels and how quickly and how well they do something. And so for agencies, it's a natural thing, but I think for a lot of corporations, they don't think that way. They don't think how many hours did I spend doing the thing. They have to actually really stop and take an educated guess on how long it takes them to do a blog post or to send an email. Like, they don't think about it. It's just on their task list.
It's so true. And I actually wasn't even, I was just talking about that, not even meaning to bring up the points model. But if anyone's never heard of that, every time Paul and I talk, I typically drop a points joke into that conversation. No, but it's the way to do it. I mean, it's we are delivering this, and that is, we both agree, a mutually understood value. We're delivering that. So yeah, I mean, if you look at Paul's book on that, it truly does change the way you think about kind of pricing of services. And I think it's something really very relevant for building a business case, and associating the true value of the investment you're going to make. Cool. So some questions. We're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything in the Content Strategy Collective Slack channel. If you haven't signed up, go do that. There is now almost 400 content strategy leaders in the community, and it's becoming a really amazing thing. But I do have some questions for us under time. You mentioned personalization a number of times. What are some business cases for personalization that you see making major impacts, or that you predict will become bigger things in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, personalization to me is the holy grail of the application of AI to marketing. It's, if you think about in your consumer life, all the things that are personalized to you that you don't stop and think, well, thank goodness for machine learning engineers, the Netflix recommendations are so great, or Spotify is so great, or Google Maps like just knows where I'm going and when, and everything that we experience as consumers and the best apps we have are trying to predict what we're going to do next or what information we're going to need. It's why predictive search exists in Google. You start typing a word, it tries to predict what the finish to your sentence is. Gmail tries to predict the end of your sentence when you start typing in Smart Compose. Netflix tries to predict what you're going to watch. Amazon tries to predict what you're going to buy. And so if you start to think about all those consumer experiences and realize everything is about prediction and personalization, you start to look very differently at your role as a marketer. And if you think about all the things you do every day, so like if you're in charge of email, you're trying to predict which subject line is going to get the most opens, which CTA is going to get the most clicks, which which offer is going to get the most purchases. In content, you're trying to predict what are they going to read, what headline works best, what questions should I answer, advertising, what channel it's all prediction. And we just largely, some of us use analytics, but the reality is most of us use educated guesses and instinct to do our job. And at the end of the day, the outcome for the consumer should be a personalized experience that they feel like, wow, I went to that site and my experience with the conversational agent, or my experience of the recommended content. I read one piece and they recommended another. Or I read this and then there was this service that I absolutely needed. And after the third article I read, they recommended that service to me. You're trying to predict at an individual level, or at least within a lookalike group, what that person is going to do, so you can then personalize email. So a great example that to me is very tangible is smart newsletters. So Rasa.io is a company that we collaborate with and we're actually starting to use.
Yeah, they're great.
Theirs learns, so if we have 100,000 people you're going to send a newsletter to, theirs will curate the news, it'll pick which ones to send, and then over time it learns Jeff's preferences versus my preferences, and we will actually get completely different newsletters based on the things we click on. Think about it like how your Facebook feed or Twitter feed or Instagram work. It eventually learns your preferences and surfaces different things to you. So if you run newsletters, you're likely sending the same newsletter to your entire database. that shouldn't be. Like, it should go when they're likely to open it. It should be the links they're likely to click on it. And so that's just, to me, it's such a practical example of where machine learning and AI can really play a great role.
Yeah, I think that that one specifically is so easy to get from a personalization perspective. And then, some of the other ones I'd mention are on-page personalization, where you can sense that somebody is from a particular organization or they've been to your site before, and you can present them with appropriate messaging. If you can recognize that they are in a marketing team, a larger marketing team, 20 plus persons, and your previous site would have allowed, might have let them land on that SMB landing page, or might have communicated something that was very guide towards kind of a mixed bag of personas. But you can tune that for the pain points and the challenges that a larger marketing team faces. I mean, that's invaluable. They're not having to wayfind into one of these situations. It's not just about landing pages. It's all across the buyer journey that personalization can have a major impact. So I think that if you're thinking about it for any type of business and you're not knowing who asked the question, it's, am I taking advantage of every part of the journey, every nurturing campaign, communication, web experience, and even in application? So if you are a SaaS solution, when you're inside the application, am I providing personalized information, or am I just providing information? In the search space, the history of this space is all just information. That's one thing that I'm very passionate about. We provide a personalized metric for difficulty. So it's how hard is it for you to perform well? And so there's an application of personalization. It's not just generally this is hard or this is easy. It's how hard is it going to be for me?
Competition is this. It's like, no, I
Yeah,
don't care. Like, my domain is what determines whether or not I can, if that competition level is actually accurate.
exactly right. And yeah, so many folks have come up with these hacks, like where they're saying, oh, well, I'm a 40, the average the competition's an 80, so that must mean it's hard. Not necessarily, because if
Right.
you've covered that topic well and you have authority on it, you don't need to be, that huge cohort, that huge monster to perform well, because you've told the world that you're an expert there. And you've seen this with some of the content that, your team has built. And I think it's an illustration of this. When you're writing great content about, in your case, artificial intelligence concepts, it's instantly successful. I mean, you keep putting hits on the board in that respect. So I think personalization is anytime you can give something to someone that's only for them,
Mhm.
and come up with the reasons why that would be impactful for your business. And I think that you'll see the way. So awesome question. Um, Another one very similar for machine vision, or in your case, you said vision. They say a little bit ambiguous as to typical use cases for machine vision. What do you see as being kind of top of mind, things that are most relevant for the most teams there?
Yeah, so that's why I said, like, a lot of times prediction is where most people are going to fall, and even language. But in vision, there are growing applications. So the subcategories would be image recognition, which, so a real practical one is, I came up out of the PR industry, and we would do monitoring of brand mentions. And the only way you would know if a brand was mentioned was if the name appeared in a transcript and the search went and pulled that transcript. It's like, okay, the name was mentioned. Or you had a video transcript and you know that someone appeared. Well, now there's so many things, obviously, online and through social media. How would you know if, say, you had a Snapple bottle? Like, if a Snapple bottle is in a video, how would I ever know it was in a video? I wouldn't. Image recognition, though, when layered over a social network, could actually extract for you every time a Snapple bottle is appearing in videos worldwide, and tell you whether it was good or bad, and if it's like who the person is. And so, like, that's, again, it's a kind of a big picture one, but brand monitoring to where you can actually identify images or faces is a huge thing. Facial recognition, for better or for worse, is going to be a massive thing within marketing and sales. So again, there are lots of as with a lot of areas of AI, there's some slippery slopes here, but let's say I just find I did a podcast for Fitness Center, so I'll go on the fitness industry one. Let's say I walk into my local gym, and it obviously they know who I am because I scan my badge when I get in there. But let's say their cameras, which most football stadiums have this technology in them to know who's in the stadium and profile them based on whether or not they're in an FBI database yet or not. Let's say my gym was able to use facial recognition to follow me around the fitness center and actually know which machines I used. They could actually use vision, like computer vision, to look at how I'm using each machine. And if I chose to opt into this and allow this, they could actually use AI to do an entire recommendation engine around how to improve how I'm using the gym. And I could say, well, my goal is to lose 10 pounds. And they could say, well, based on our monitoring over the last 30 days, you're actually adding muscle. Here's how you would want to use. You want to go use it. Again, it's more of a theoretical application, but once you understand what each of these types of AI do, you can look at your specific industry and be like, well, how could I use computer vision? The reality is there aren't that many outside of retail. Facial recognition, computer vision isn't being used that widely yet in marketing and sales, but the tech is there. It's just a slippery slope of how you apply it.
Yeah, I think that, obviously the slippery the slippery slope are all over the place in artificial intelligence and, the ethics of everything we do. I think that if you think about the way that I would like to think about it is if there is a human service being provided, if there's a safety value, if there's a security value, I mean, they could technically in your fitness case, tell you maybe you're not using the machine right.
Right.
Like maybe you could hurt yourself. I mean, in addition to other things like let's maximize your workout, so you could, tone up those abs even more, going through the door. But in every application, there's going to be ways that are, helpful for the fitness centers of the world. Maybe that's also, that could be a, another business, a food entity, a grocery store, a casino, all have, facial recognition in place to help you to give you a more personalized experience. And if you're doing that for the right reasons, and maybe even doing things that can amplify your service offerings, or put somebody in a position where they feel like, wow, this is like been extraordinarily helpful for me. And I really think that, for the questions of can I come up with it? I think one way to look at it is look at services. Look at things like, look at those beautiful services that you may be providing or that your business provides. And could those be assisted? You're not going to replace them, but if you've got a, early, if you've ever had a golf coach that uses, images to diagnose your swing, or diagnose like a fitness workout or sense that you've got a problem or anything like that, taking that to the next level and really finding out, ways to accelerate. I think you can apply that to a lot of businesses.
No, I love that example. Sports made me think of that. There's tons of apps like that right now. You want to learn how to dribble a basketball or shoot a basketball or swing a golf club. Computer vision is trained on the best models, and then it can be applied over to you. So it can see your elbows out of point. So I'm like working on my jump shot in the backyard. If I had an app that I could just pull up, which there probably is, I haven't searched for it yet, and just record myself taking shots, and then it could show me, okay, you shoot most like Klay Thompson or like this. Based on that diagnostic, we're going to actually tweak your shot to closer profile that person or this golf, whatever. So entire businesses can be built around computer vision. As you're saying, like it's all about just finding where is a human in the loop now, and where could we enhance that with, computer vision. Like events, if you got 20,000 people in an event, you in theory could have computer vision that monitors whether the tables, the food and beverage is getting low because you maybe don't have enough people to go around. Well, that's a customer experience. I would categorize that under marketing. And so I think about, I understand what computer vision is, like where could I use it?
Right, and even for events, I mean, you can go on and on. I'll leave this one and put the pin in it here, but events is a good one for you, because you run an event with Macon, and I'm a huge fan. Obviously, not running this year, but it's going to be a huge continued success. But imagine, midway through, you could tell a sponsor that they need to tweak, level up their game to drive more
Right.
traffic towards, because you might lose them if they have a bad experience. They're not going to renew. But midway through, you're like, I could say, wow, yeah, I've got to tweak something. I've got to drive some people towards them because, there's maybe a gap in both of our games. But I think that there's, again, so many, and there's going to be, I've got a number of other questions. We're going to cover them in the Slack channel. But before we run out of time, just want to mention the AI Academy for marketers. Go check it out. It's marketingaiinstitute.com/academy/home. Contact Paul direct at Paul Roetzer. There's also for the Marketing AI Institute, has a Twitter, has a LinkedIn. And then for us, if you're looking to solve some of these content challenges, automatic gap analysis, making sure your efficiencies keep going up and to the right. If you're publishing 100 articles and 10% of them are getting recurring traffic, you need this. You need to be thinking about this. You need that number to be 20 or 30. Go check out MarketMuse Pro, more for somebody who's doing it with a small team. Some of our other offerings and our premium offerings are going to be more of a fit for larger organizations. Please also email me, jeff@marketmuse.com, if you have any questions. So I'll see you in the community. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure. I think some of the insights that we talked about could turn into, winning success stories for anyone who's building the business case for AI. So thanks again.
Always good to talk. Thanks for having me.
All right, cheers. Bye.